On July the 30th of 2023, my wife and I set out for the city of Dnipro in Ukraine. It's spelled D-N-I-P-R-O. Apparently the D is silent because none of those people ever use it. And so we boarded the flight out of LAX, thanks to Coach giving us a ride there at a disgustingly early hour in the morning. And we flew from LAX to Chicago. And at Chicago, waiting for the next leg of our journey, we encountered Henry Bennick. We expected him to be there. We were planning a rendezvous. Henry Bennick and his wife, Victoria. I'd never met Victoria because when he preached here, his wife, Sarah, was still alive. She succumbed to cancer. And so we renewed old acquaintances. Henry and I had become quite good friends when I attended the funeral of Lee Robertson in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And he was there with Clarence Sexton, and the three of us commiserated with each other. But anyway, when we were chatting with each other, Henry was a guy that was born and raised in an Orthodox Jewish home in Cleveland, Ohio. And he was always a Harley Davidson guy. He built a couple of choppers and then kind of upgraded over time. And at some point, a woman called up his house and invited him to church, and it was a wrong call. She was calling the wrong place. Well, she called him and then called him again and then called him again and called him again, and he said, "Yeah, why not?" So he went to Cleveland Baptist Church, which was at the time pastored by a guy that I know named Roy Thompson, who was a wonderful, godly man. He presented the gospel. Henry trusted Christ as his Savior. Interesting, Orthodox Jew becomes Baptist preacher. He then went to Tennessee Temple Schools and graduated from there with a Master of Divinity degree, and he has been the guy at the helm of two different Jewish evangelistic mission agencies, currently Jewish End Time Missions. So we're talking in the airport waiting for the next leg to fly to Munich, and he said, "So, how are you flying?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, you're not flying economy, are you?" I said, "Well, yeah, I am." He said, "Seriously? You're flying economy?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "You don't want to do that." I said, "Why not? I want to get there." And he said, "It's brutal. It's brutal." And I said, "Okay, I'm not going to dispute that. It is." So, surprise, surprise, no request from us. And my wife doesn't really care because she just curls up in whatever seat and is comfortable. You know, if I could find her a nice place on the floor, she would be comfortable there because she's so small. You want to travel with her because you actually like have a half a seat extra with her. And Henry, he said, "Give me your boarding pass." Okay. "Mrs. Waldrip, give me your boarding pass." Okay. And he went and he upgraded us to business class. And in retrospect, the almost 3 weeks we were there, I thanked him, and I thanked him again, and I thanked him again, and I thanked him again, and I thanked him again. And there we are in Chicago. And I'll show you the picture, but I just want to give you a quick overview. We're in Chicago, and I turn around and I didn't know whether the guy I was looking at was the guy I thought he was, because, you know, all Asian guys look alike. Isn't that right, William? Well, it turns out that he's in Chicago on his way to see his daughter graduate from nursing school, and lo and behold, it was him. And we had a great reunion in Chicago, and then he went to where his daughter graduated from nursing school, which was where? Okay, and then she basically did a cross-country trip back to Southern California, and so that was great. I tell you what, that was fun. So I had two great treats. Number one, business class seat. Oh, it was great, and then got a chance to see William on his way to do what I think every dad dreams of being able to do, and he was able to do it, and he did it, and he'll remember that. She will remember that for the rest of her life. And so we then got on the plane and flew luxuriously to Munich. In Munich, we changed planes and got into a small commuter aircraft to go to a place in Poland that I'd never heard of called Rzeszów. Rzeszów is as close to the Ukrainian border as you can get for an international airport. And then Henry negotiated with a cab driver to jam our luggage into his small cab, and the four of us are riding about 2.5 hours to the Ukrainian border. When we got to the Ukrainian border, we boarded the train that runs from the Polish border all the way through Kyiv. That's how they pronounce it. Russians pronounce it Kiev, but Ukrainians pronounce it Kyiv, all the way to Eugene Kozachenko's city of Dnipro. And we got off, and it was an all-night train ride because they don't want moving targets for the Russians in the daytime. And so it ended up being far more pleasant than it normally would have. But how many of you have ever just flown halfway around the world? I know Jack does it all the time, so no big deal. But Sophia has done that, and Carlos has done that, and Brian. But that was in uniform, right? So how many of you have done it by choice? Okay, Genesis and Stephen, and it can be, and then Daniel and Mara went with us to, and Genesis and Monica went with us to Nepal. Brutal. And so we appreciate so much Henry. Then we were there. We got there on a Friday. The next day, which is a Saturday, I met with a men's group from two different congregations and ministered to them for a couple of hours. Then the very next day, the Sunday morning service at Menorah Baptist Church. The menorah is the 7 candlesticks, right? In Dnipro, there is a synagogue named the Menorah Synagogue. It's the second largest synagogue in all of Europe. There is a Jewish center built around it that you'll see later. It is the largest facility of its kind in the entire world. It is bigger than the Skirball Center over on the 405. And so at Menorah Baptist Church, the ordination service took place. Brother Eugene was the presiding pastor. The ordination board was comprised of Eugene Kozachenko and Henry Bennick and me. They had invited another pastor, and you'll see a picture of him later, but there was a conflict that he simply could not get out of. And we had the opportunity of seeing him the next Saturday, and he was very contrite, very humble apologies. He's got a good-sized church, and he gave me and Henry the opportunity to speak to a large group of refugees. And so we did that. So beginning with Monday, they started foraying us out into the countryside, getting us closer and closer and closer to the combat line, where the Russians and the Ukrainians come together. From the very beginning, we were in an area where you could hear the thumping of howitzers. And that means they're not very far off, because you can't hear them really a real long ways away. And what they would do is they would take us to hospitals where there were hospitals where there were soldiers, Some of the soldiers were in psych wards because they were suffering from PTSD. They had been so traumatized by the violence. One group of men that I spoke to were in a brigade. I think, is it a brigade that's 3,000 guys? Yeah. It was a brigade that 1 year before, of the 3,000 guys in their brigade, 2,800 of them were killed in one day. The Russians mauled them. And so these guys were the survivors, and some of them were in this hospital. We also had an opportunity to go and speak to refugees. 20 million Ukrainians have just left the country. They just picked up and left. One pastor basically showed himself to be a hireling and not an under shepherd, because when the Russians rolled across the border, he just picked his family up and left. He didn't even call anyone in the church to tell him he was leaving. They just came to a service and there was nobody there. Well, thank you, Pastor. And so, interesting, his name in Ukrainian is Demas. Okay, Demas hath forsaken me, having gotten scared and run for his life. Anyway, that has left a large number of countryside homes, farmhouses, sprinkled all over the eastern part of the country. And what the government does is they put refugees in those empty homes that are in villages. What they also do is that there are farmhouses, and they put soldiers in those farmhouses. And so wherever their equipment is, for example, there's a Patriot missile battery stationed in a growth of trees, and a group of the soldiers will live in this house, and another group will live in this house, and another group will live in this house, another group will live in this house, and depending on what shift they have of manning the hardware, they each one of them gets to sleep come sleep time in a real home, in a real bed, and eat home cooked food that they cook. Some of them will sleep at night because they're working the day shift. Others will sleep in the daytime because they're working the night shift. And because you always want to be ready to shoot at Russian fighter planes. And so when they would gather the refugees at different community centers where I would preach to them, Henry would preach to them, they would give them Ukrainian Bibles, and then they would give them basically care packages, bags full of stuff that they would need, toiletry items and personal things, and they were very appreciative. They were very open and responsive. The soldiers obviously I say obviously, surprising to me, but the soldiers were vastly more appeared to be interested in the ministry. My pattern was to point out to them that I had, because to the refugees, I emphasized the fact that the first 18 years of my life was spent living amongst refugees. And by the way, if you want to know the reality of Native Americans being taken from their historical homelands and put on a reservation, that makes them refugees. Okay, they are refugees. I had never called them that before. They certainly don't identify as that, but according to the technical definition of the word, they are, all right? And so when I talked to them about having grown up amongst refugees, immediately their ears perked up, and they provided for me a receptive audience. When I found myself in front of guys wearing uniforms, however, whether they be in a military hospital suffering from PTSD or a military hospital recovering from wounds inflicted in combat, or when I was out at another place, for example, there were a group of guys that we rendezvoused in a hospital right next to the airport, the international airport that my wife and I had flown in and out of the first time we were there, and that wasn't anywhere near where they were stationed. We rendezvoused there because it was a bombed out hospital. They wouldn't expect anybody to be there for any reason, so it seemed to be a safe place for us to rendezvous with the soldiers without giving away their position. What typically happened for the next 2 weeks was we would not know where our guide was. We would just drive on a certain road. And by the way, the Ukrainian roads are better than California roads. Explain that. No, well, I do have an explanation, but that's another sermon. But we would go to a certain place, and then the chaplain, Sergei, would call the military rep, and the military rep would come in his vehicle and basically check us out, make sure that we're presentable and we didn't look hinky. I think that's not a Ukrainian word. Is that still an American military term, hinky? It used to be in World War II, hinky. Something's not right here, but I don't know exactly what it is. It just doesn't look right. And he would check us out, and then he would drive us to some destination where those soldiers had left their station to come and meet with us. I was astonished by the willingness of the Ukrainian military to receive chaplains from another country and gospel ministers from another country. That's not usually something that the militaries of other countries are willing to do. But Zelensky is having a problem with the Ukrainian Orthodox Church at present. He's leaning on them. They're not helping out the cause very much. And so I think he's kind of replacing the Orthodox chaplains and pastors with gospel preachers from the U.S. and from other countries. And so we had the opportunity of ministering to those guys. And at one point, near the beginning of our time there, we were at a special forces group of guys. And I don't know, I can't remember exactly. There's 4 words that describe this brigade, and they are the Mountain Wolf something brigade. I don't remember what the 3rd word is. But these guys were particularly and specially trained to fight in the western part of Ukraine, in the mountainous region of the Carpathian Mountains. But the fight is on the east side. So basically they're fighting out of their element. And sometimes they're taking heavy casualties. Sometimes they're giving heavy casualties. But here is what surprised me, their age. I was astonished at how old these guys were. There was nobody there in their 20s. These guys were in their 30s and in their 40s. Some of them were in their 50s. And you are eligible to serve in the Ukrainian military until you reach age 60. They can tap you on the shoulder until you're 60. Now, if you're approaching that age, they'll have you at doing something that requires some technical skills. But the ground pounders and the grunts are the younger guys, but I was astonished at how old they were. The United States military is, until you get to the NCOs, they are young guys, okay? 18, 19, 20, 21 years of age for the most part. How old were you when you were in, Brian? 18? Carlos, how old were you when you were in? 18? Okay, so that's pretty young, okay? That's too young to know better. And that's the reason they want you at that age, okay? Because the part of the brain that assesses risk usually is fully developed by the time you're 30. So you want to get young guys who are willing to do crazy and dangerous stuff before. Isaiah, how old were you? Okay, see what I'm saying? Okay, I was 17 when I went in. I didn't stay in very long, but my plan was that it was to be my life. So that's the reason that is the reason they want young men, because young men are terrible decision makers. They're really, really bad because they are horrible at assessing risk. Sophia, I'll be too kind to ask you how old you were when you went in the military. But if you want to volunteer it, I'll take it. Because you were in the reserves for a long time. You did 30, didn't you? Huh? 21? Okay. Was it Chief Master or Senior Master Sergeant? Okay. So she was a high-ranking NCO, telling lots of people what to do all the time, and not much has changed from what she does now. Amen. Praise God. And she's qualified to do it. Praise God. So And anyway, at any rate, we were well received, and every single person, they were eager. They were offered Bibles. They were eager to take them, and gospel tracts and things like that. And just to show you Henry's commitment to ministry in Ukraine, go home and Google the Orange Revolution. A number of years ago, the corrupt Ukrainian government had a crooked election. And they elected a pro-Russian president. And the astonishing thing was, he didn't get nearly as many votes as the guy they wanted. Surprise, surprise. Like this is not a new thing. Well, they took to the streets. The whole country took to the streets, and they had what's called the Orange Revolution. Henry keeps his eye on Ukraine so well because his grandparents had immigrated from Ukraine. And so he's always had an interest there. The village where his grandparents left from was a village that was 90% Jewish back in the day, and then a group of Ukrainian thugs came through one day and killed every one of them. There has not been a Jewish person living in that village since then, and his parents, his great-grandparents, got out like a month before that happened. So he's always had an interest. During that Orange Revolution, Henry passed out 70,000 gospel tracts in that quad center of Kyiv, where that took place. And so you might want to Google that, and I think that'll be interesting. Now, before we start looking at the videos, I'm going to want Joshua to come on up here and wait here till I give it to you. This is part of a Russian rocket. Okay, the Russians are always lobbing rockets into different parts, and I'll show you some of the damage. The perplexing issue is how come they don't do it more? And the reason is both sides are pretty corrupt, okay? But the Russian side, it doesn't appear as though Putin has nearly as much war-making material as he thought he had, because his generals were selling tanks, rockets, ammo, fuel, drones on the black market for years, and he didn't know about it. Well, that's an dictatorship for you. But this was given to me, and I'll show you the guy that gave it to me. And what Joshua is going to do is he's going to go down the aisle and give each one of you the opportunity to get your germs all over it if you want to. And just so that you'll know what it's like, you go down that aisle and up this aisle and then down that aisle, okay? Go. You're not in a hurry. Take your time. And do that while I'm talking. The guys who gave me this battle flag also gave me two other things. This was quite spontaneous. I was very surprised that they put this on the table, and many of them got a magic marker and signed their name to it and gave it to me afterwards. And I think I've got a picture in there of them holding it. But one of their officers walked up to me and tore a unit patch off of his uniform and gave it to me. And so Ben is going to take this, and you're going to give each person an opportunity to look at it and feel it and all that, and you're going to follow at a distance behind your brother. Okay, go for it. And then Jacob is going to come up here, and this is the plaque that they gave me. And you're going to do the same thing, only you're going to start at the back with your grandpa. Let them look at it first, and then you work the opposite direction. And pause anytime you want to, guys, so that you can see all the pictures as they come up. So before we start looking at the photos, let me just mention a couple of things. My computer crashed Wednesday. And I know you don't feel any pain for me. But what it did was it confused my process of gathering all the photos that I have. And there are some photos that I simply haven't had enough time to get together. And so I was scrambling to get my message for this morning done. And Thursday was a travel day for me. Friday I spent all day in bed, sick as a dog. Saturday was a travel day for me. And I was here until 2 this morning getting my morning message. And so I have put together these slides. They are not in order. There is no rhyme or no reason from them, and the identification on each picture depends on what device took it and what sequence I downloaded it. And so I'm going to be bouncing back and forth chronologically, and I hope you will forgive me. So with that, Mr. Carlito, would you fire it up? Okay, this is from a couple of years ago, all right? This woman in the middle, well, the only woman, the woman is an opera soprano. She performs at the local Ukrainian opera, and she's a songbird. This woman can flat sing. Her husband plays the keyboard. I don't know what he does for a living, but he accompanies his wife on the keyboard when she sings in church. And 2 years ago, when Putin rolled in, she went out of her mind. She basically lost it. She had fits of hysteria. And her husband thought, I wonder if maybe she's not really a Christian, because we've not been given a spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. So he brings her by Pastor Eugene, and she, okay. And Eugene didn't feel safe around her husband to slap her so she could say, thanks, I needed that. So what he did was he opened up the Bible and he brought her to Christ. And so within a day or two, he also came to Christ. He was interested in church, but I don't think he had ever made a profession of faith. If I recall correctly, she had a false hope. In other words, she made a profession, but wasn't really saved, and her conduct betrayed the real relationship or lack of a relationship with God that she had. And there is on the left Eugene Kozachenko. His given name is Evgeny, but it translates into English as Eugene. Next slide, please. And there they are in the Dnieper River, and he's about to drown this poor man. Next. And there he is, I think, drowning the man's wife, this lovely gal. She's a sweet Christian. Next, please. There he's coming up out of the water. Notice the stranglehold on the man's neck that he has. It's important when you're baptizing people to keep them under control, and you grip the larynx as hard. I'm kidding. Next, please. So, can we make that smaller so that people, or that's it? Okay, this is all about missions. This is all about reaching the world with the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ. We can't go there all by ourselves. We can minister here, but there are places that we cannot go, and even if we go there, we can't speak the language, we can't communicate, we have no grip on the culture. And so that's what this is all about. We are a missionary Baptist church. So a significant portion of our resources goes to support foreign missionaries. And what is missions, really? In a word, church planting. The Apostle Paul in the book of Acts designated an area as having been taken for the cause of Christ after he had established a church there. Because once there's a church established in that region, it is their primary responsibility to reach that area. And Paul's attitude as a missionary, once I get a church there, I'm going to move on and start a church someplace else. And so that's what we engage in, okay? Have you finished with the entire auditorium? Okay. Are you sure you did it right? All right. Thank you, Ben. Next picture, please. And of course, this is what happens when people don't turn to Christ, when they have no opportunity to hear the gospel. And those who have the opportunity to hear the gospel and reject Christ, it's far worse for them than it is for someone who has never heard the gospel before. Next, please. Okay. This was taken on the second Saturday that we were there. There is me on the right. There is Henry Binnick on the left. Can you imagine him on a chopper? Yeah. He is so in love with his wife Victoria that as he was courting her, he sold his Corvette to finance going back and forth so that he could convince her to marry him. There's Eugene in the center, and he translated. There is the pastor. His name is Ivan, which is John, frequently translated Evan. So Evan and Ivan, not Ivan as a girl, but Ivan as the Ukrainian and Russian counterpart to John, is basically the senior, the oldest of the Baptist pastors in Dnipro, and has the largest church. And that was a gathering on Saturday of refugees that were brought in from surrounding suburbs of the city so they could come in. They said, you know, we've got stuff for you. We've got a New Testament for you. We've got a bag full of necessary items that your family will appreciate, and we'll give those to you after a church service and a nice meal. And so they understand the plan going in. Are you done? Okay. All right. Are you just about done, Jacob? Should I wait for you? Are you just about there? Okay. No rush. But I'd like it now. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Jacob, have you been down this aisle yet? Okay. So Alexis has already seen it, and she wanted to see it twice. Okay. There you go. Pretty good, huh? Ethan, isn't that pretty good, huh? Yeah. Jesse, have you got a chance to see it yet? Ethan, pass it on to Jesse. There you go. Now, Rick, have you seen it? Ricky, have you seen it? Okay, good. Yo-Yo, you saw it? Okay. All right. Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it. Let's hear it for these guys. So the reason that Henry and Eugene and I are so casual is it's not a church service. Okay, it was a gathering of refugees on a Saturday. But this is a wise old bird. This pastor, you never see him in the auditorium with a Bible in his hand. He doesn't have a tie on. I kind of like that. Next slide, please. This is in a military hospital. This was during the first week that we were there. These are guys. Let me get my pointer out. Why have one of these if you don't use it? Right? This guy here is a pastor's kid from Kiev. He's graduated from seminary. He doesn't know what he wants to do. Eugene told me, because he spent the whole time in Eugene's house with Nikita. He's Nikita's best friend. And there's Evan right there. He's the tallest guy in the group, 16 years old. But what this guy, what he wants to do is be a servant. See what? He's looking for a place in a ministry to be a servant. So he's not in this for himself. He just wants to serve God. He doesn't feel he's mature enough or qualified to be a leader, so he wants to be a follower. And of course, this is Eugene. This guy right here is Sergei. He is the guy who is a full-time chaplain with the Ukrainian army, and he was the driver. Of course, let's see, there is Nikita. This guy here he's a GI in the psych ward. Of course, me, there's Evan, and there's another guy who's a GI in the psych ward. They dress casual. They live in a very, very, very low-stress environment because these guys have been damaged. If you have an interest in finding out about what happens to people, if you are a veteran, if you have a member of your family who is a combat veteran, I would urge you to buy David Grossman's books. Number one is titled On Killing. The second one is titled On Combat. David Grossman is a PhD psychologist. He happens to be a member of the Baptist Church in Arkansas, and he is the only person that has ever studied the harm you bring to a person by training him to kill. Now think about that. When you take an 18-year-old boy and put a uniform on him and you teach him how to kill people, you are trying to instantaneously undo 18 years of parenting. Because we try to train our children not to kill people. Amen? My parents wanted me to not kill my brother. And they wanted him to not kill me, even though we tried. But what you do in the military is they undo 18 years of training. And he pointed out, as a psychologist, it harms people to be trained to kill. You damage them spiritually, emotionally, psychologically. And on top of that, what if as the result of the training they actually then do kill someone? It damages them far worse. Okay? And that dynamic, I think we have people in the auditorium that know people who've been in combat who probably have not yet appreciated how much they've been damaged by the environment that they've gone through. Next, please. This guy walked up to me. He is a former soldier in the Soviet Army, a Ukrainian by birth and nationality and ethnicity. He was in the Soviet Army, and he was retired from the Soviet Army before the fall of communism. He walked up to me and he said, "Thank you for saving my people 4 times." And I said, "I don't know what you're talking about." And Eugene said he's talking about saving his people, the United States saving his people. And if we backtrack from 4, the first time would be the current war that they're in, okay? The previous time would be the fall of communism that brought the Soviet Union to an end, the end result of glasnost and perestroika. The third time was World War II. So when would the first time have been? Huh? It may have been World War I. Okay, he didn't specify what 4 times, but he's a nice guy. He looks younger than me, doesn't he? He may be younger than me, but he looks like he lives in Huntington Beach, but he actually lives in Ukraine. Next slide, please. He was very appreciative. Now, this is the unit. This was the first of the units that we went to. There is Eugene on the left. There is Sergei in the middle. And there is the commanding officer of the group. They were living in this very, very rough farmhouse. It's just, it's not even a 1-star accommodation. It would be like a 1/4-star accommodation. But they had that thing signed. They asked me if I would take a picture of them. He specifically asked through Eugene, "Can you please ask the pastor not to put my picture up on the internet? I have family that are in the occupied zone." And so he didn't want his family used to try to leverage him in his fight against the Russians. Next, please. This was the first of the refugee centers that we went to. And there was a village that the mayor was hospitable, and they had told everybody living dispersed among the population of the village were these refugees, each of these refugee families living in an empty residence. And they were all notified, they know who they are, where they are. Everybody's got a cell phone. They know how to reach out to everybody. Everybody has internet, thanks to Elon Musk. And they were very, very appreciative. They said, "But there's one problem." And I said, "What is it?" He said, "Elon will not allow Skylink to work in the battle area." So in that 5-mile swath where the fighting takes place, he doesn't let Skynet work. And I don't know why. I don't think he's being a nasty guy. He may know something about intelligence gathering and the Russians' ability to make use of it, yada, yada, I don't know. But all of these guys have got that. And this is me at the time giving my testimony of how I came to Christ. They really wanted me to talk about designing spy satellites. That was just really a big deal to them, because I would talk about how spying on them Russians, always spying on them Russians. And then I always pointed out to them that the NSA, there are no secrets from the NSA. The NSA now possesses the capacity to turn on your phone camera even when your phone is turned off. Without you knowing about it. If the battery's in it, they can turn that camera on. They can also turn the speaker on, the microphone, without turning the phone on. So they can see where the camera's pointed, and they can hear the conversation that's going on, and your phone is off. And you think you have privacy, and you do not. I pointed that out to these guys. They were not surprised. They were not surprised. Next slide, please. This is another hospital. This is also a psych ward hospital. Eugene is translating for me. Almost everyone in Ukraine speaks Russian. Not as many people in Ukraine speak Ukrainian, because for 70 years they were under Soviet domination and control. So I asked Eugene, I never knew. I know he speaks both languages, and his whole family, they speak both languages. But I asked him, I asked Olga, what language did you guys speak when you were courting, when you got married, and what was the first language you taught your kids? She says, Russian. We learned Russian. And she said, I speak Ukrainian. It's somewhat more difficult for me to speak Ukrainian. But when you go out in public anymore, you don't speak Russian. Almost everybody speaks Russian in the home, but you don't speak Russian outside the home because this is Ukraine and we're at war against Russia. Next, please. This is the platform at Menorah Baptist Church. There is a menorah right there. They light those candles before every service. This is the pulpit. This is the fan that's greatly appreciated. And this is Eugene Kozachenko being Eugene Kozachenko. He's got a congregation of about 50 people, and he doesn't have a good song leader. So you know what he did? He didn't get up there and act awkward himself. He just throws it up on the wall and let him read. And so, bravo to him. Next, please. To the left here, let me get this. To the left here is the Menorah Synagogue. I don't know whether I've got that picture of that here, but this is the Menorah Center, and this is Eugene, and this is his wife Victoria, and it was good for Henry because he's a year younger than me, but he's had a couple of open heart surgeries, and Victoria is a bright woman and a very, very sweet gal, and capable of lifting 2 suitcases at once. Next, please. Here we are up on the roof of the Menorah Center, and we're heading up these stairs to get to this portion of the rooftop. Olga, right here, very classy lady, she discovered from social media that they were going to do a symphony. You see, well, I thought there was a war on. There is a war on. I thought they were concerned about getting bombed. They are. But this is what they did. They decided to put together an orchestra presentation of 2 American composers who happened to be Jewish. Help me now. Anybody know his last name? Gershwin. Al Gershwin. Okay. And who was the 20th century? Oh, and I can't remember his name. He was the guy that wrote Travolta and West Side Story. Who wrote West Side Story? I'm sorry? Leonard Bernstein. So what they did was they arranged Leonard Bernstein and Gershwin songs and played for the evening. Next, please. I'm taking everybody's picture because nobody has any interest in taking mine. And next, please. Here we are on the rooftop, and this is the near surroundings of Dnipro. Dnipro is a first-class city of about 1 million. It was the place in the Soviet Union where all of the big rocket engines were designed and built for the space program for the Soviet Union. Next, please. Okay, next, please. Yeah, nice conductor. Next, please. There he's thanking the United States, right? Everybody's applauding. Next, and they didn't know I was going to be there. They were doing that whether I was there or not. Next, please. There I am, and there's a woman that I spent time with while I was in Ukraine. Next, please. And this is Eugene at the age of 19. And that's Henry when Eugene was 19. Okay? He was a university student at the local university. He was majoring in English Lit. His father was a big Communist Party wheel. And when he trusted Christ as his Savior, he walked away from it to surrender to full-time gospel service. Henry spotted him. He said, I believe God's hand is on this kid. He's 19 years old and he knows what to do. See, what does he do? He preaches the gospel. He preaches the gospel. Puts his life on the line again and again and again. He evangelizes Jewish people. He evangelizes Gentile people. He started 2 churches. I mean, he's one of the most active people for the ministry I have ever seen, and highly, highly organized, which I admire because I am not. Next, please. This is a gas station. I thought you'd want to see one. Next, please. So at the far end is Sergei playing his guitar. There's Eugene. There's Yvonne. There's their friend. Pam? Oh, she's next door. Where is she when you need her, huh? And then here's Nikita, okay? Ilya. You know how I remember his name? The man from U.N.C.L.E. His name is Ilya. They call him Eli, but his name is Ilya, like Ilya Kuryakin. He's got a different last name, but they would get up and sing before these guys. They're not bad. I mean, they're not really any good, but the soldiers appreciate the effort. You know, he's a pretty good guitar player, and I wonder how many guys that age would be too absolutely gutlessly cowardly to stand up in front of a group of soldiers when you're not a singer and sing. But they did it anyway because they were serving God. I appreciate them so very much. Next, please. They did it without laughing. They did it without giggling. They did it without being snarky, okay? This is a hospital. Notice all of the bombed out windows, okay? And the reason all these windows are bombed out is about right over here, a rocket landed and left about a 20-foot crater about 40 feet across. It blew out all the windows. They evacuated the hospital. The hospital is here, and right over here where the speaker is, or where the TV is the international airport. All of their windows are blown out. The runways are all cratered. It can't be used, obviously. Next, please. There is the south side of the airport right there. Next, please. I'm shooting out a window because I said, can I take pictures? And the guy said, well, I don't want you to ask me to take pictures. Why don't you just roll down the window and drive by kind of quickly and take your pictures? I said, okay, I'll do that. And so this used to be, that's airport. And all the windows are blown out. Of course, the lawn guy hasn't been around lately. Next, please. I don't even remember. Oh, this is a park. Next, please. Right in the middle of the city. This is a building. This is one building. It got cut in half by a Russian rocket. And the Russian rocket killed more than 50 people. I think, if I recall correctly, 17, 18 of them little children. And quite a surprise. That's not a good way to start the day. Okay. They're leaving it that way. You know why? They want to remember. Next, please. Here we are out in the boondocks. As you drive along, you drive along, and there's lush vegetation. Ukraine is a place where you can grow anything. It's some of the richest soil I have seen in my life, with the notable exception of the Willamette Valley. I think the Willamette Valley has better soil, but wow, can you grow stuff in that country. And as you're driving down a paved road, you see nothing, but when you come back, you see a tank, another tank, a howitzer, an armored personnel carrier, another armored personnel carrier, and they were there the whole time. You just didn't see them until you were coming back. They know how to camouflage stuff. They know how to be sneaky. Next, please. Do I need to tell you what that is? Jimmy, you know what that is.
Is it two-seater?
No, it's a one-seater. There's only one there. That's what's called a modern convenience if you're in the year 1800. Next, please. As I would go through, I wanted to passively record where I was, and so just the weather download is a passive app. In other words, you don't necessarily GPS your location by getting this information, okay? And at least not narrowly, because I wasn't interested in letting Vladimir know where I was. And so I went through, and about every 15 minutes I would click that and save it, just so I'd have a screenshot and be able to, at some point in the future, get a big map of Ukraine and put all the dots of all the places that I went to. Some of the places that I went to were formerly occupied territory that's been pushed back by the Ukrainians. A number of the places we were within probably 5 kilometers because we could hear howitzers going off. Next, please. Rich countryside, my goodness, the whole country is that way. By the way, that's the kind of terrain the M1A1 Abrams tank was designed to operate in. It did really good in the desert, but it wasn't designed for the desert. It was designed for the Fulda Gap. And go home and Google Fulda Gap, Fulda space GAP. That's where we expected the World War III tank battle to take place between the T-72s and the M1A1 Abrams. And so I told those Ukrainians, I said, I just want you to know that the tanks we promised you, that my wife's nephew has been driving for 20 years, okay, and who just got back home from Poland, and he may come back over here and teach you guys how to drive them, for all I know. They were made to operate in this kind of terrain. And in the Gulf, the M1A1 Abrams tank punched through T-72s like they were made out of cottage cheese. And that brought a big smile to their faces. Next, please. This was a community center where I had an opportunity to speak to that group of men who had lost 2,800 out of 3,000 the year before. Next, please. That's the officer. His name is Peter in English. He walked up to me and thanked me very much. He told me he very much appreciated the message from God's Word, and I thanked him. He's got a great handlebar mustache. My goodness. Next, please. There is Peter climbing up in a tree, because right over here is a tennis court, and there were 2 teenage girls and 3 fat old men playing tennis with them. I hope they were like grandfathers or something. But they got what did I say? Tennis? They were playing soccer, I'm sorry, because the soccer ball went over the fence and caught in the tree. And this officer, boy, he went up that tree like he was made for it, and got the soccer ball for them. Next, please. Next, please. Okay, this is the Crimean Peninsula. Okay, this is where Dnipro is. I think maybe here, and this is where I was. We got to down in this region, which is really close to where the Russians were. Next, please. Yeah, that's Dnipro, and at the time that I took this screenshot, we were here. Next. You can get an app for your phone that will show you GPS where you are at all times. And that is the city of Dnipro. And that shows it in relation to Turkey, in relation to Greece, in relation to Italy, in relation to Russia. Let's see now. Georgia and Armenia are here. Next, please. Next, please. Okay, that's the one on this side is a V-Rod Harley Davidson. The one on that side is a Honda Davidson, or a Honda imitation of a Harley Davidson. This one is owned by Eugene Kozachenko. There is a pastor in Southern California that hates Eugene Kozachenko because he owns a motorcycle. He hates me too. And I asked Eugene, I said, how'd you get that thing? So Jack, how much do those things cost brand new? What, 25 grand probably? So he said, well, when the war started, all of these guys that had stuff were unloading all of their property so they could get out of Dodge. And he said, you know, I sent my wife, because we didn't know what was going to happen in the war, I sent my wife and kids, except for Nikita, he stayed behind. We sent them to the U.S. for a year. And he said, I was feeling all discouraged and stuff. And I said, oh, so there was nobody there to say no. He said, you got it right. So this guy advertised for this motorcycle, and he got it for $3,000. That's a $25,000 motorcycle. The paperwork and the inspection, all the nonsense cost $4,000. So total out of pocket was $7,000. And he likes to ride it. He's a scaredy cat. He says he is, okay. And this pastor here, so he rides all armored up, okay. He's got fiberglass here and here and here and here and you know, all that kind of stuff. And a good helmet, which obviously that stuff is wise. This guy here is a Baptist preacher in town who wears only a helmet. So he's going to have lots of scars someday. Next, please. These motorcycles were located at a restaurant in Dnipro. I don't think I've ever been to a city that had these kinds of restaurants. I mean, every restaurant is different, and they're neat and they're cheap. And when the sirens go off, they finish their meal. But the guy that owns this restaurant owns the only 2 Harley-Davidson dealerships in the entire city. And so he decided to build a restaurant that a guy can ride up into, just get off his cycle and walk over to his table. And so that's this motorcycle, that's this, and as you see, he meat, tats, and drinks. So, you know, it's a biker place. They welcome non-bikers, but they prefer bikers. Next. That's Nikita there, sitting next to me. Yeah, nice looking guy, isn't he? Huh? Did you hear any sighs? Next, please. And there's Eugene right there. He's getting ready. We finished our great meal. He's getting on his bike. This other preacher's getting on his. I don't even know if that other guy wears gloves. Boy, you got to wear gloves, man. Anyway, it was a great evening. And everywhere you go in the city, you'd be walking down the street, and there's this little hole, and there's this little door. You walk through the door, not expecting anything, and there is like a 5-star restaurant behind it. And wow, I was totally surprised. And you say, well, I thought there's a war going on. There is. And I showed you the building that got cut in half, didn't I? And how many of you saw the video that I sent back of the sirens and the rocket strike at night that I slept through, but that my wife woke up to? How many of you had a chance to see that? Yeah. Stephen, I'm sure you saved it. So see Stephen if you would like to see it and you haven't seen it. He would have it. He's a very reliable guy when it comes to saving stuff like that. Next, please. Yeah, he's getting ready to leave. Next, please. And the other guy is leaving. Next, please. This was the aftermath of that strike that I sent to you while I was there. This is a hotel, and that's the crater. and it blew a bunch of stuff out. They had probably 24 people killed. Next, please. I wish I had taken a back distance. This is a bomb shelter, and what these are segments of hollow concrete, and they put them next to each other because they're the bottom, the sides, and the top, and they're walk through, and you stack as many of them end to end as you want to make a shelter, and then the last one you put in a concrete cap, and in at the beginning of it, there's a steel door to go through. And so this was in the plaza about a half a block from our hotel. Next, please. Next, please. This is Dnipro the morning that we left. Next, please. That's the hotel we stayed in. It was built in 1910, a 5-star hotel. It cost I think about $50 a night to stay there. I may be wrong, but I think that's what it cost. Wow, was it a nice place? Almost as good as Airbnb. That's a joke. Next, please. Okay, Henry Bennett is on the left. There's Victoria. There's Eugene. He doesn't look real happy. There's Evan. He doesn't look real happy. There's Nikita, who's very happy because we're leaving. And there's me, and there's Pam. Next, please. Close-up picture. I tried to get a picture of these guys without those ridiculous shorts. Next, please. Next, please. There's Henry and Eugene. They're probably talking money. They do that a lot. Next, please. This is the train that we took to get out of Dodge. Next, please. I'm cheating, aren't I? I usually ask her permission, but I didn't feel like it. I wanted to let her know that I don't have to if I don't want to. Next, please. And this is the countryside. Next, please. Next, please. And again. And I got a copy. I downloaded this from the internet just to let these guys see. This, my friends, is an M1A1 Abrams tank. Okay, this is what will put the Russians to flight on the ground. Next, please. We are in Kyiv. We're in the right in the middle of town, and right next to the train station. And this town, this building, Samsung, noticed that all the windows are blown out because a rocket struck nearby and just blew out all the windows. Next, please. This is Ilya. This is his dad. His name is Sergei. Also, he is a pastor in Kyiv. Very active guy. Very aggressive gospel minister. He's very involved as a chaplain in the military, and he's a wonderful guy. He is kind of a missionary supported by some Baptist churches in Kentucky and Tennessee. Next, please. Again, and there they are. He always takes his picture. I'm glad he does the thumbs up rather than some of these stupid-looking gang signs nonsense. Thank you. Next, please. And there we are overlooking the city. The main part of the city is here along the river. Next, please. Next, please. This is a panorama 180-degree shot. Next, please. And there was I think the last meal we had at a restaurant where we went to this museum and we're walking down the street. We stuck our heads in this door. Some gal was saying, in English, almost like a carnival barker trying to get us to go in. Well, we walked past and went down to another restaurant, turned around, came back, and we walked in, and lo and behold, my goodness, whoa! And I think the meal for the 4 of us cost $50. It's amazing. Next, please. That's a toilet. You say, well, Pastor, you seem to have a toilet fixation. Yeah, no. Yeah, no, that is funny, isn't it? That is funny. Most of you had never seen the primitive kind that I showed earlier, and I just wanted so that you can say you have lived. This is a brass toilet. It's not ceramic at all. I would be afraid of being electrocuted if it were, some highly conductive thing. But I walked in, I went, I've got to show this. Next, please. And this is in the restaurant, some of these old artifacts, ancient. Next, please. And this shows you, this is in Kyiv. This is what you see when you walk by and there's windows, because the rockets do hit. The suicide drones, a suicide drone is a drone designed not to just observe and not to just fire hellfire missiles, but it is actually designed to go in and explode on contact. Next, please. Mariupol was a city in the south on the shore of the Black Sea that when the Russians invaded, this big factory, the factory workers did not want to give up to the Russians. They stayed at work and they fought the Russians. And the Russians took them all as prisoners of war, and this is just a sign to free these guys. Next, please. This is the train station. Next, please. This is a little hotel right next to the train station, where between trains you can rent rooms by the hour. Next, please. There's the room. Next, please. We're on the train. Notice how happy she is. I said, smile, please. Next, please. That was our accommodations for the next 18 hours. Sometimes air conditioned, usually not. It got real hot in there. Next, please. And there she is, going horizontal. Next, please. She's completely horizontal. Next, please. Next. Next. And there we are in Lviv, which is famous for its chocolate near the Polish border. And the train stopped for a while, and then we went on to the border. Next, please. And there we are in Kyiv before getting on the train. Next, please. Eugene let me sit on his motorcycle. Harleys are lower than everything else. But anyway, he asked me if I wanted to ride it. He didn't really want me to. I could tell you don't want to ride it, do you? I said, no. And so I just sat on it. Next, please. Next. Just a water tower. Next. We're now in Poland, heading to Szczecin, which is where the international airport is. Notice the way the Poles spell. I guess in that part of the world, the first letter is ignored. I don't know. Next, please. And we're off the train. We're standing in line to go through customs. Next, please. Next, please. That's the Ukrainian train engine that brought us. Next, please. Next, please. Henry has just negotiated with the taxi driver. And the taxi driver is hustling us off to the small van that'll take us to Szczecin. Next. There's my wife and I. We're safely I don't remember where we are there. I think maybe we are. No, that's in that hotel by the hour. Next, please. Look at this. We're in Poland. What do you see? Poland, Circle K. You can't find a Circle K in LA County, but they're in Poland. They're pretty smart people. Next, please. That is what you call a Patriot missile battery. they find you with a picture of one of those in Ukraine, I would be behind bars. But I'm in Poland on my way to the airport. The likelihood of me being stopped is very small. So I took the picture. And I'm in Poland. Next, please. Borg Warner. What do they do these days, Jack? They still do transmissions? Because they're big time in Poland. I didn't know that. Next, please. Again, next, please. That's the airport in Rzeszów. Nice airport. Next, please. Airport. Next. 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 Notice how nice it is? Did you notice all of the homeless guys in tents relieving themselves on the sidewalks? It's because they're not there. Next, please. Next, please. Next, please. What's funny? Oh, go back. Go back. Her? Oh, yeah. She was very nice, by the way. Next, please. And that's Victoria and Pam. Next, please. Is that it? Oh, we're getting on this dinky little plane. That's the long line. Heading to Munich. Next, please. Next. Now notice this is in Victoria, British Columbia. My wife has flown from LAX to O'Hare to Munich to Rzeszów, from Rzeszów to Munich to Ontario. And now TSA decides that your tiny little containers of stuff have to each have their own plastic bag. It took 20 minutes for her to transfer her stuff from a plastic bag to their individual plastic bags because they're government employees and they don't care. Next, please. These are wounded guys in a hospital. There's Eugene translating, or Nikita translating, and there's Eugene behind me. Next, please. These are guys that run a Patriot missile battery. They let us take their picture if we promise to blur out their faces. Next, please. And there's this guy I met in Chicago, on his way. This guy right here, on his way to see his daughter graduate from the nursing school. Bravo, Dad. Good play. Next, please. And here we're outside the first place we went. These two guys are officers. This is an NCO. This is an officer. He actually let Henry hold his pistol. So guess what Henry did with his pistol, CR? Guess what he did? Immediately, he swept me with the barrel. I said, don't do that. He said, well, there's no clip. I said, it isn't a clip. It's a magazine. And don't sweep me with it. And then he gave it back to the guy. The guy should have never given it to him. Next, please. This is a part of a suicide drone that blew up on impact. Next, please. And this is my piece of rocket, of a Russian rocket. Next, please. There she is. That was the female that completely surprised me. She was with the first group. That's a very, very bad picture of her, very bad lighting. But she's probably 5'11", and she could probably whoop most of the guys in this room. But she's not a combat soldier. She is a PR liaison. Very, very nice gal. She arranged for the visit and everything. And her signature is somewhere on this. Next, please. There's Henry showing another piece of the suicide drone. Next, please. That's it. We're done. I'm sorry that I have taken so very, very long. He asked me, how long is this going to be? I said, I have no idea, and clearly I did not. Do we have birthdays, anniversaries that we would like to recognize without going outside and taking pictures? The Carricker's anniversary is how many years now?
57.
57. Wow, that's great. Congratulations. Anybody else? Rick? I can't hear you. Congratulations. How old are you now? Oh, wow, that's great. Anybody else? Wow, we've got a lot. Yes, Eva? Wow, oh my goodness. I went really long on the wrong Sunday, didn't I? I'm sorry.